Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to make something happen, the further it seems to slip away? That endless effort, the sleepless nights, the heavy feeling in your chest, it isn't progress, it's resistance. And Neville Goddard taught that resistance is fighting, and fighting is proof you've forgotten the truth. Creation is already finished. The paradox is shocking. The struggle you thought was bringing you closer to your dream is actually holding it hostage. Every time you push harder, you're silently declaring, "I don't have it yet." But the law of assumption says the exact opposite. You already are what you desire. You just haven't assumed that state fully. What if everything you're chasing is already yours, waiting for you in the unseen? What if the very tension you feel is not a problem to fix, but a signpost pointing to the real solution? This video isn't about working harder, repeating affirmations louder, or fighting longer. It's about ending the fight altogether. Because here lies the secret. The moment you step into the wish fulfilled with quiet confidence, resistance dissolves. You stop struggling, you start being, and life has no choice but to mirror your new state. And once you see this, you'll never look at resistance the same way again. Resistance has a way of sneaking into life disguised as effort. It feels like the endless pushing, the constant double-checking, the late nights replaying the same worries in your head, that knot in the stomach, the tension in the chest. It all whispers that something isn't flowing. And Neville Goddard would say, "This is not creation, this is fighting." Resistance is fighting the very state you're meant to rest in. Think about the last time you wanted something deeply, maybe money, love, or a new opportunity. Did you notice how the desire seemed to spark more questions than answers? What if it doesn't work? What if I fail? That cycle of doubt is resistance. It's not proof of failure, but a signal you're still clinging to the old self. The law of assumption reminds us, you can't wear the old coat and expect a new identity. The struggle often shows up in subtle ways, like checking your phone every 5 minutes to see if they replied, or refreshing your bank app hoping numbers magically changed. That compulsion isn't faith, it's fear disguised as action. Resistance and manifestation cannot coexist in harmony. One trusts the end, the other fears the journey. And where imagination creates reality, fear is a poor architect. You might even remember family sayings like, "Nothing comes easy," or "You've got to fight for everything." Harmless on the surface, right? But those phrases plant the belief that struggle is noble, that doubt is natural, that resistance is part of the process. Neville Goddard teachings flip that upside down. The moment you're fighting, you've lost sight of the truth that creation is finished. Imagine a gardener who keeps digging up the seed to check if it's growing. That restless habit kills the very thing he planted. In the same way, resistance shows up as that itch to control, to interfere, to make things happen faster. But manifestation truth is clear. The seed knows what it's doing. You don't grow it by tearing it apart. You let it unfold. Resistance feels like dragging heavy luggage through life. Every step is effort. Every thought feels like work. And yet, the law of assumption is a law of ease. To assume the wish fulfilled is to lay down the bags and walk lighter. When you're living in the end, you don't check if you're arriving. You're already home. That's the difference between struggle and faith. It's not about pretending resistance doesn't exist. It's about recognizing it as feedback, a mirror showing you where you're still identifying with lack. Resistance says, "I don't believe I am yet." Faith whispers, "I already am." And this whisper is louder than 1,000 struggles. When you feel the secret of fulfillment, resistance begins to loosen its grip. The inner world reveals everything. If you notice you're exhausted, burned out from trying to make manifestation happen, pause. That exhaustion is resistance. It's not punishment, it's a clue. Conscious creation was never meant to be about blood, sweat, and tears. It's about assuming the end and allowing the echo to form in the outer world. There's a paradox here. Resistance looks like effort, but effort is often resistance. People think more action will solve the block, but that action comes from fear, not conviction. It's like paddling against the current. You move, but you don't advance. The power of assumption is found when you drop the paddle and let the river carry you. So resistance isn't a curse, it's a compass. It shows you that you're still battling the old state. When you feel doubt, struggle, or constant effort, it's simply a sign you haven't assumed the end yet, and that's the bridge to the next realization. Neville Goddard taught that creation is finished, and the battle was never yours to fight in the first place. Neville Goddard's teachings revolve around a radical but liberating idea. Creation is finished. Nothing you desire needs to be built from scratch. It already exists in the unseen. The law of assumption reveals that the end is secure, the bridge is prepared, the path is laid. Fighting means forgetting that truth. When you battle, you're denying the very safety net already holding you. Imagine watching a movie when you already know how it ends. Do you panic when the hero is trapped in a dark alley? Of course not. You know the resolution is written. That's how life unfolds under conscious creation. The resistance is fighting against the script, screaming at the screen, forgetting the last scene is already guaranteed. Live in the end, and the tension dissolves. The phrase "creation is finished" sounds abstract until you realize how practical it is. Think of a book on your shelf. All chapters already exist. You don't write them, you simply turn the pages. Manifestation truth works the same way. Every possibility already lives in your inner world, waiting for you to assume it. If you're still struggling, you're stuck rereading the old chapter. Neville Goddard once said, "You are already that which you want to be." Fighting comes from the illusion that you're not. Resistance and manifestation are like oil and water. They can't mix. If you're forcing, you're signaling you don't yet believe. And belief, not effort, is the doorway to the state of fulfillment. Creation being finished is like a radio station already broadcasting. You don't create the signal, you simply tune in. But here's where most get stuck. Instead of adjusting the dial, they keep shaking the radio in frustration. Resistance is fighting the device, while faith is quietly aligning with the frequency. When tuned in, the music was there all along. It's easy to forget this truth when appearances scream the opposite. Bills pile up, the phone stays silent, the promotion doesn't come. The old self panics, believing something must be done, but the power of assumption reminds you. Those outer scenes are echoes. The inner scene is the cause. You don't fight echoes, you change the voice. Every fight is a declaration that you've lost sight of the end. You can almost hear resistance whisper, "You must do more, try harder, fix it now." But Neville's wisdom was always gentler. Step into the end and let the process unfold. The battle isn't proof of strength. It's proof you've forgotten creation is already complete. Think of baking a cake. Once the ingredients are in the oven, the cake is finished in essence. You don't open the oven every 5 seconds to fight for it. You trust the process. That trust is the same trust needed in conscious creation. The moment you assume the wish fulfilled, it is done. The rest is timing, not effort. So many chase manifestation as if it's a prize dangling in the distance. But the truth is, the prize was in your hands the moment you imagined it. Resistance is fighting shadows, trying to grab what is already yours. Creation being finished means the only thing left is to claim it inwardly and let the echo arrive outwardly. And here lies the bridge to what comes next. If resistance means forgetting creation is finished, then what exactly does it say about how we see ourselves? The answer is subtle but powerful. Resistance shows you're still identifying with lack, while the state of having never battles. That's where the real shift begins. When resistance appears, it's not the world attacking you. It's your identification still clinging to lack. Neville Goddard teachings show that the self you occupy determines your experience. If you're trying to get the desire, you're affirming that you don't yet have it. That constant chase is resistance in disguise. True having doesn't chase. It rests in quiet confidence. Picture someone desperate to win love. They overanalyze every text, replay conversations, wonder if they said too much. Their entire energy screams, "I don't have it yet." That vibration is resistance, and manifestation cannot bloom there. The state of being loved doesn't chase validation, it shines naturally. When you assume that identity, the fight dissolves. Money is another clear example. A person in lack might hustle endlessly, checking accounts, stressing over bills, saying, "I need more." But the inner world is echoing scarcity. Conscious creation works differently. Assume the wish fulfilled. When you embody abundance, actions arise from freedom, not fear. The state of having money doesn't fight, it flows. It's almost humorous. Resistance often disguises itself as hard work, determination, or being realistic. Yet what's really happening is identification with the old state. Neville Goddard would say, "Feeling is the secret." If you feel lack, no amount of external push can cover it. The law of assumption doesn't respond to effort, it responds to identity. Think of trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more awake you feel. That's resistance. But when you surrender, sleep comes. Manifestation truth works the same way. Forcing keeps you awake in lack. Resting carries you into the dream of fulfillment. Imagination creates reality, not struggle. We all know someone who embodies calm confidence. They don't fight for attention, yet people are drawn to them. That's the state of having. It rests, it radiates, it attracts without effort. In the same way, living in the end means embodying the result so fully that resistance has no foothold. Resistance whispers, "You're not there yet." But assumption declares, "I already am." The power of assumption makes the unseen real, turning identity from seeker to possessor. And once that inner shift occurs, outer reality has no choice but to mirror it. The struggle dissolves, replaced by rest. Sometimes people say, "But if I stop fighting, won't I lose everything?" That fear is resistance talking. Neville's answer is simple. The state of fulfillment doesn't fight to exist, it just exists. The tree doesn't struggle to prove it's a tree. It rests in its nature, and life flows through it. So it is with your desires. Even in moments when appearances look opposite, the state of having remains at peace. It knows the outcome is secure. That peace is not passivity, it's powerful alignment. The inner world radiates certainty, and resistance loses its grip. That's why conscious creation feels lighter when embodied. So resistance is the red flag that you're still playing the part of the seeker. The state of having doesn't grasp, chase, or demand. It simply rests. And the real mistake most make? When resistance appears, they push harder, thinking that force will fix it. But as you'll see, that only reinforces the illusion of lack. When resistance shows up, most people's instinct is to push harder. They double down, trying to force the desire into existence with more effort, more affirmations, more action. But Neville Goddard would gently remind us that frantic push isn't creation, it's confirmation of lack. Resistance is fighting by saying, "I don't yet have," and that belief creates more of the same. It's like trying to untangle headphones by pulling both ends harder. The more you pull, the tighter the knot becomes. Resistance and manifestation work the same way. Pushing harder when stuck doesn't free you, it binds you deeper into the state of not having. The law of assumption requires a softer touch, living in the end, not fighting in the middle. Imagine someone chasing wealth. They're working late hours, stressed, repeating affirmations like a mantra, but with fear behind every word. Their actions aren't born of faith, they're born of desperation. Conscious creation thrives on alignment, not panic. The mistake of pushing harder reveals that the inner world still identifies with lack. Neville's teaching, "Feeling is the secret," cuts through this struggle. The feeling of already having doesn't push, it relaxes. But most think, "If I stop trying, I'll lose my chance." That fear is resistance whispering. True power comes not from fighting, but from assuming the wish fulfilled. The end is secure, the fight only says otherwise. Think about dieting. The more someone obsesses over losing weight, the more restricted and miserable they feel. That obsession reinforces, "I'm not there yet." In contrast, when someone identifies with health, choices flow naturally. No fight, no push, just embodiment. Manifestation truth works the same way. Assumption first, results after. When you push harder, you unintentionally program the subconscious with the belief that you're incomplete. It's like telling a friend every day, "Don't forget me, don't forget me." Eventually, it only highlights your insecurity. Resistance is fighting in this way. It screams lack. Faith whispers completion. It's easy to misinterpret persistence as pushing. But persistence, in Neville Goddard teachings, is resting in conviction, not struggling for proof. Pushing is effort rooted in fear. Persistence is rest rooted in faith. The outer world bends to conviction, not to restless effort. That's why the inner world must be your focus. Pushing harder often feels productive. It tricks the mind into thinking something's being done. But like running on a treadmill, you expend energy without moving forward. Conscious creation is not about speed, it's about direction. When you live in the end, even small actions are powerful because they flow from the right state. Resistance says, "Something is missing," and when you push harder, you agree with it. That agreement is why desires seem delayed. The law of assumption works differently. Assume nothing is missing. Rest in that fullness. From there, every step is effortless, because it's not trying to reach the end, it's expressing the end. So the next time resistance shows up, remember, pushing harder won't fix it. It only reinforces the lie that you don't already have. Instead, the real shift comes when you quietly assume the end, when you enter the scene and feel the relief of done. That's where the power begins to move without effort. The real turning point in Neville Goddard's teachings is simple yet profound. Assume the end with quiet confidence. No shouting at the universe, no desperate pleas, just the calm certainty of someone who knows. Resistance is fighting because it doubts. Assumption is rest because it trusts. The law of assumption isn't about effort, it's about identity. Imagine stepping into a movie theater halfway through a film. You relax, knowing the ending is already written. You don't shout at the screen demanding resolution. You simply enjoy the story. Living in the end works exactly like that. Conscious creation flows when you stop forcing and simply assume it is already done. Quiet confidence feels different in the body. There's no tightness, no frantic pace, no second guessing. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath too long. When you assume the wish fulfilled, you experience relief, as though a heavy weight has been lifted. That's the secret. The relief itself is the sign that the state is real. Take relationships, for example. The struggler texts, overthinks, checks their phone endlessly. The one who lives in the end assumes love is already theirs. They feel loved, so their actions flow naturally. One lives in resistance, the other in quiet confidence. And as Neville said, imagination creates reality. The inner world leads, the outer follows. Money works the same way. Someone in lack keeps stressing, pushing, forcing, hoping to make it. But when they shift into abundance, they feel the relief of already being provided for. From that state, ideas appear, opportunities arise, not from panic, but from alignment. Quiet confidence is the key that unlocks flow. Quiet confidence doesn't mean passivity. It's not sitting in a corner doing nothing. It's acting from fullness instead of fear. The person who assumes wealth acts boldly because they know abundance backs them. The person who assumes health chooses differently because they feel whole. Resistance is fighting. Confidence is expression. Think of an athlete who's trained for years. On game day, they don't force. They trust their preparation. They step onto the field with quiet confidence, embodying the outcome. That's the law of assumption at work. You don't beg for what you already are. You express it. That shift changes everything. Quiet confidence is also contagious. Others sense it in your tone, your posture, your energy. You don't have to declare it loudly. The state speaks for itself. Conscious creation becomes magnetic because the outer world mirrors the inner. Resistance crumbles in the presence of someone who already knows. That's why Neville emphasized living in the end. It's not about pretending, it's about being. When you enter the scene in imagination, you taste the relief of fulfillment. That relief is more real than the outer delay. Resistance can't survive where peace resides. Quiet confidence is the evidence of faith. So the real shift is not in doing more, but in being more. Being the one who already has, already is, already lives in the end. And when you feel that relief, you realize something deeper. Resistance has no cure except this, because the feeling itself, joy, gratitude, fulfillment, is what dissolves the fight. Neville Goddard teachings always return to one point: feeling is the secret. Resistance is fighting, but feeling is surrender. When you allow yourself to feel joy and gratitude, as if the wish is already fulfilled, resistance melts away. It's impossible to hold both gratitude and struggle at the same time. One cancels the other. Think of a child who trusts their parent completely. They don't worry if food will be on the table. They live in the joy of being cared for. That's the state of fulfillment. When you assume the wish fulfilled and feel the gratitude of done, you return to that childlike trust. The inner world takes the lead, and the fight ends. Gratitude itself is a powerful tool, not the forced kind, but genuine gratitude that arises from knowing it's already yours. For example, instead of repeating, "I will be wealthy," you rest in, "Thank you for my abundance." That shift isn't just words, it's an emotional anchor. Conscious creation responds to that vibration. Joy works the same way. Try to be joyful and resistant at the same time. It doesn't work. Joy carries the state of having, while resistance echoes lack. When you choose joy, even in small doses, listening to music, walking in nature, laughing with a friend, you align with the frequency of fulfillment. That alignment is the cure. Neville often spoke about living in the end as if it were already real. The secret isn't in the words, it's in the feeling. Reading a love letter isn't the same as being in love. You must feel the state, embody it, breathe it. Resistance thrives in thinking. Fulfillment thrives in feeling. Take money again as an example. You can say affirmations all day long, but if you feel anxiety in your chest, resistance is still steering. But when you breathe, imagine the relief of bills already paid, the freedom of choices already open. That feeling dissolves the knot inside. That's the cure. The beauty is that feelings can be practiced. Just like training a muscle, you can sit quietly, close your eyes and step into gratitude. You can rehearse joy until it becomes natural, and soon, resistance doesn't even find space to live in your body. The inner state becomes your reality. Many people ask, but what if I don't feel it at first? That's normal. Resistance has been practiced for years, sometimes decades, but persistence in feeling pays off. Like learning an instrument, the first notes may sound awkward. With practice, harmony comes. The law of assumption responds to your persistence in state, not your perfection in effort. Surrender isn't weakness, it's strength. When you surrender to joy and gratitude, you're not giving up, you're tuning in. Imagine a radio dial again. Resistance is static, joy is the clear signal. And when you find the right station, you realize the music was always playing. You just had to listen. So feeling isn't a side note, it's the medicine. When you allow gratitude and joy to take over, resistance dissolves like mist in sunlight. And the next question naturally arises, what happens when appearances still contradict the desire? That's where persistence transforms from struggle into resting conviction. Neville Goddard often emphasized that appearances are deceptive. When life looks opposite to what you've imagined, the old self panics. It wants to fight, to push, to fix. But persistence in Neville's teachings doesn't mean battling circumstances. It means resting in conviction. Resistance is fighting appearances. True persistence knows the unseen is in charge. Think of planting a seed. The soil looks empty for days. If you judged only by appearances, you'd think nothing was happening. But the unseen work beneath the surface is what really matters. Conscious creation is the same. Manifestation truth says, the inner world controls the outer. Your job isn't to battle dirt, it's to trust the growth. This is why Neville said, live in the end. The end exists in the unseen, and your persistence is to rest there even when the five senses argue otherwise. Resistance screams, it's not here yet. Faith whispers, it's already mine. The law of assumption always bends reality toward the unseen conviction, not outward appearances. Consider someone who desires love. Days pass, and no calls or texts arrive. The old self panics, checking phones, overanalyzing silence. That's resistance. But persistence rests in the feeling of already being loved, regardless of silence. Soon, circumstances align because imagination creates reality, not appearances. Money works the same way. Bills on the table may shout lack. The fearful self responds by pushing harder, stressing, fighting. But persistence isn't panicking over paper. It's resting in the identity of abundance. When you embody wealth inwardly, outer channels open in surprising ways. The unseen always dictates the seen. Persistence is misunderstood as stubbornness. People think it means holding on with white knuckles. But Neville Goddard teachings clarify, persistence is gentle, peaceful, steady. It's the calm of someone who already knows how the story ends. Resistance shakes, persistence rests. That rest itself is power. One could compare it to flying in an airplane. You don't panic when you don't see the destination yet. You trust the pilot. Persistence is resting in the unseen pilot of imagination. Resistance is storming the cockpit, thinking you must steer. Faith sits back, knowing the unseen controls the flight. And here's the beauty. Persistence trains the nervous system to stay calm under contradiction. The more you practice resting, the less appearances rattle you. Over time, outer delays no longer steal your peace. You begin to embody what Neville called spiritual awakening, the realization that the inner state is the true cause. This kind of persistence is not exhausting. It doesn't drain energy. It sustains it. Fighting appearances wears you out. Resting in conviction strengthens you. That's why persistence feels lighter, even joyful. Resistance may look busy, but persistence is quietly powerful. The law of assumption rewards the calm, not the frantic. So when appearances contradict, don't fight them. Recognize them as echoes of the old state. True persistence rests in the conviction that the unseen always controls the seen. And as resistance begins to fade, signs appear. Calm expectancy, lighter emotions, and spontaneous flashes of fulfillment. That's the next stage of the journey. There comes a moment when resistance loosens its grip and the shift is almost tangible. Neville Goddard would say you begin to sense calm expectancy. It's not hype or nervous anticipation, it's quiet confidence. Resistance is fighting, but expectancy is peace. It feels like knowing the mail is coming, even if you haven't seen the envelope yet. A lighter heart is another sign. The heaviness of constant worry, the endless overthinking, begins to lift. You notice you laugh more easily, breathe more deeply, and carry yourself with less tension. Conscious creation has this effect. The inner world shifts, and the outer can't help but follow. Your soul knows before your eyes see. Then spontaneous imaginal flashes begin to appear. You might catch yourself daydreaming, not from longing, but from already living the wish fulfilled. These little inner scenes are effortless, almost playful. Feeling is the secret, and when you feel it naturally, resistance dissolves. The state of having becomes your new normal. It's like adjusting to a new pair of shoes. At first, you're aware of every step, but over time they fit so naturally you forget you're wearing them. The same happens with identity shifts. The new state stops feeling forced and starts feeling like home. That's how you know resistance is fading. Even in conversations, you notice the change. Instead of speaking from lack, you casually mention things as if they're already part of your life. It feels natural to say, "when I travel," instead of "if I travel." The law of assumption subtly reshapes your language. That shift is evidence that the inner world has changed. Calm expectancy isn't passive, it's magnetic. People sense something different about you. They may not know what it is, but they respond to the quiet certainty you carry. Neville Goddard teachings always pointed to this. The outer world is compelled to match your conviction. That inner calm calls the echo into form. Think of someone waiting for a friend they know is reliable. They don't check the clock every minute. They relax, trusting arrival. That's how resistance fades. Instead of straining for proof, you rest in trust. Manifestation truth says, the unseen is more reliable than appearances. And when you know this, peace takes root. These signs don't always show up dramatically. Sometimes it's subtle, like realizing you no longer feel anxious about what once consumed you, or noticing that your thoughts drift more toward fulfillment than doubt. Conscious creation works quietly, like dawn breaking, not with fireworks, but with steady light. It's important to celebrate these moments, not by boasting, but by acknowledging the shift within. Gratitude magnifies them, anchoring the new state. Resistance thrives on worry. Fulfillment thrives on joy. When you consciously notice the signs, you strengthen the bridge of faith. And as these signs deepen, something profound begins to happen. Outer contradictions no longer rattle you the way they once did. The state of having feels stronger than any temporary delay. This deeper embodiment leads to a place where resistance barely touches you anymore. At a certain stage, you stop being shaken by the ups and downs of life. Neville Goddard called this deeper embodiment. The place where resistance is fighting no longer tempts you back into doubt. You see the outer world as what it truly is, a delayed echo of your inner state, and echoes don't scare you when you know the voice that caused them. It's like shouting into a canyon. The echo may come a second later, but you never mistake it for the source. In the same way, when bills, silence, or rejection appear, you no longer panic. You recognize them as remnants of old assumptions. The law of assumption tells you the new state is already working its way out. This deeper embodiment feels like unshakable calm. You walk through life with an inner knowing, even when appearances scream otherwise. That's when manifestation truth really takes root. You stop reacting to shadows and start living from substance. Imagination creates reality, and reality bows to imagination, not the other way around. Think of someone learning to surf. At first, every wave feels overwhelming. But as skill grows, waves lose their power to intimidate. The surfer rides them with balance. In the same way, resistance may still show up, but deeper embodiment keeps you balanced. You know the sea cannot swallow the one who trusts their board. Deeper embodiment also changes how you speak to yourself. Instead of, "Why isn't it here yet?" you hear yourself saying, "Of course it's on its way." That shift in self-talk is proof of identity. Conscious creation becomes second nature, not a technique to practice, but a state to inhabit. People around you notice the difference. They see you calmer, lighter, less reactive. Even when challenges appear, you carry a quiet authority. That authority comes from knowing the inner world is cause, and the outer is effect. Resistance and manifestation no longer compete. because resistance has lost its footing. It's not that life becomes free of obstacles. Rather, obstacles no longer define you. You might see a delay, but you know it's temporary. You rest in the unseen, and the outer eventually echoes back. Neville Goddard teachings remind us, live in the end, and the middle takes care of itself. This stage feels liberating. You no longer waste energy fighting appearances. You conserve that power for imagination, for joy, for creating. Resistance drains, embodiment sustains. It's like moving from surviving on scraps to feasting at the table. Once you taste embodiment, lack feels foreign. And with time, you stop measuring progress by external results. You measure it by your inner stability. Did I remain in faith today? Did I feel the relief of fulfillment? That becomes the true scorecard. Outer changes become inevitable, but inner steadiness becomes priceless. At this depth, something shifts permanently. You know that resistance cannot unsettle you anymore. The outer is just a mirror running a few steps behind. And that realization leads to the final step. Stop fighting altogether and start being, living fully from the identity of the wish fulfilled. At the heart of Neville Goddard's teachings lies a simple but life-changing truth. Stop fighting and start being. Resistance is fighting because it struggles to become. But conscious creation asks nothing of struggle. It invites you to assume your identity in the wish fulfilled and live from there. The fight ends the moment you are. Think of an actor stepping onto the stage. They don't fight to become the role, they embody it. Every gesture, every word flows naturally because they've assumed the part. In the same way, when you embody your fulfilled desire, life becomes expression rather than effort. Imagination creates reality through identity, not force. When you live in the end, the need to convince yourself disappears. You don't wake up daily trying to believe. You wake up as the one who already is. Resistance dissolves because it has no role in the state of being. Manifestation truth is simple. You don't fight to be, you just are. Consider health. The struggler fights symptoms, fears every sign, worries about outcomes. The embodied one lives from health. They walk, breathe, and move as health itself. The outer eventually aligns. Resistance and manifestation separate here. Resistance demands proof. Embodiment radiates certainty. It's the same with wealth. One person pushes, hustles, stresses over every penny. The other assumes abundance as identity. They don't pretend, they embody. Their choices, tone, and actions flow from fullness. The law of assumption always favors being over-wanting. This is why Neville Goddard insisted, feeling is the secret. The feeling of already being shifts everything. You don't ask, when will it come? You live as though it has. The state itself creates the bridge. Resistance is fighting the absence. Being rests in presence. Living from identity changes even the smallest habits. Instead of longing for a future vacation, you plan as if travel is part of your life. Instead of hoping for love, you speak, dress, and carry yourself as loved. Conscious creation isn't about pretending. It's about expressing the truth of who you are now. There's freedom in this shift. Fighting is exhausting. Being is natural. When you assume your identity and the wish fulfilled, peace becomes your companion. And peace itself is power. The outer world cannot resist the pull of an embodied state. Over time, this new identity feels effortless. It's no longer practice, it's normal. You forget what it was like to struggle for proof. Resistance vanishes because lack no longer feels like home. You live in the end, and the end lives in you. So, the journey brings us here. Resistance ends not through effort, but through being. Stop fighting, start being. Assume the wish fulfilled, live in the end, and let life echo your identity. And now, with resistance dissolved, we're ready to open the larger conversation about Neville Goddard's radical insight. Resistance is the sign you're still fighting. So now the question is no longer, how do I fight resistance, but rather, am I willing to stop fighting and start being? Every doubt, every struggle, every restless effort is simply a reminder that you're still wearing the old identity. But the moment you assume the wish fulfilled, the battle ends because you're no longer trying to get there, you're already there. Take a moment and reflect. Where in your life are you still pushing, stressing, or demanding proof? And what would shift if you chose instead to rest in the quiet conviction that it is already done? That reflection alone can open the door to a new state of being. Remember, resistance is fighting. Fulfillment is resting. The law of assumption is not about someday, it's about now. Assume it, feel it, live it, and let the outer world echo your new state. If this message stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay connected. Together, we'll keep diving deeper into Neville Goddard teachings and the power of conscious creation until living in the end becomes your natural way of life.